That's the luckiest man in America back in at least back.
Well, that makes it 3 lucks. He gets alimony, which is still lucky. He gets the lottery ticket returned to him, which is still lucky, and then he actually wins the lottery.
Huge.
He better not watch those Final Destination movies because he's got to watch out driving behind any semi or anything in case
he's maxed it out. There's no more. You're only going to go down from here. Hey, it's Raif Palmer and Rahul Iyer for another episode of the I Just Want This Done Divorce podcast, coming at you live on YouTube and on Riverside.fm. For those of you watching or listening live, we appreciate you. We are doing live broadcasts now every week, typically Thursday morning, 10 o'clock Central, or really about 11 o'clock Central. And we're here coming at you with fully loaded with a great show today. We're going to talk about my appearance on Channel 9, WGN's, Chicago's very own WGN Channel 9 TV for the morning news segment Tuesday, because it was Labor Day weekend. You're watching these shows about a week after. If you're watching live, you're seeing it right away. Otherwise, it drops about a week after we record. So the day, Tuesday after Labor Day, I was on Channel 9, and we'll talk about that briefly. We've got the man who won a lottery jackpot right after getting divorced. Lucky him, unlucky ex-wife. We'll talk about, Rahul's going to talk about another Russian oligarch divorce story. We had one earlier, and this is an interesting story about age at first marriage and marital quality. Then we got our celebrity marriage update, Logan Paul, little name drop, Lake Como wedding, all the rage these days. And then the Denise Richards update. We promise updates and we are delivering. So we're going to tell you about what's going on in the Denise Richards divorce. Then our core topic today is school issues, custody, parenting issues related to schooling for minor children, kids under 18. We're going to talk about that for a while and get into some of the topics that are important in divorce. We're Illinois divorce lawyers in the Chicago area, in Chicago and the suburbs. So that's our grounding. And we're both partners at STG Divorce Law in Chicago and the burbs. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Well, we'll try to generalize it to help everyone. Next, we've got some divorce legal news. We've got a couple of interesting updates on some changes in the law in California and also Australia, which is sort of interesting, showing some trends. And then Bumble dating app news. And we're going to cap it off with Rahul telling us how to tell if you're dating a psychopath, all coming up next. Okay, let's get into it without dragging our feet, shall we? So we're going to talk here about my Channel 9 appearance. I won't drag this out. The link to the interview is going to be in the notes, like the links to all of our stories. So basically, Robin Baumgarten and Larry Potash interviewed me yesterday, 2 days ago. Anyway, on Channel 9. It was really exciting. Got a chance to talk about common myths and misunderstandings in divorce. And it was a lot of fun. I really appreciated being on the show. I've been on live TV multiple times in the past, but it was fun to finally be in our hometown. So thanks to WGN and Robin and Larry. And I'm available anytime. And so is Rahul. If you want us on, we love talking about these topics. So it was fun. Check out the link. You'll learn something. There's some interesting myths I dispelled all in about 5 minutes. So it's interesting because you expect to go into this fancy studio, and it's more like it looks kind of like almost like a warehouse building, because they need all that space for the various studios. And the building's been there a long time. And one cool side note for those of you from Chicago, right next to Studio 2, where they record the morning news, is Studio 1, which is famous for hosting Bozo's Circus and the Ray Rayner Show, which are iconic Chicago shows that any kid growing up in the 70s and 80s remembers. As a kid before school, I would watch that Bozo Circus in the morning, and I wanted to be in that studio audience like you couldn't believe. And I told Larry and Robin, I finally made it here 50 years after I wanted to get here, but fun nonetheless. Well, anyway, thank you very much, WGN. It was exciting, and always available to speak about these topics and anything in the book and upcoming books. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. Okay. Next, let's talk about this. We got this. This is a great story. Man wins jackpot after divorcing. $173 million jackpot. New Jersey man Michael Wiersky went from heartbreak to headlines when he claimed a $273 million lottery jackpot. And this story popped up on Instagram. It's actually from a few years ago, but it's all over social for some reason now. And I either forgot about it or didn't know about it. But this guy had just finalized a divorce, been unemployed for months, bought a Mega Millions ticket, and he lost the ticket before a stranger returned it to him. And he won and cashed in $162 million after taxes. He did buy a new Ford F-150 Raptor, so there's that.
Well, there you go.
So that's what you buy when you get $160 million. You go get your Raptor.
You go get the Raptor you've always wanted. Very nice gesture by the guy who returned the ticket, huh? I mean, he won the lottery twice, really. He got the lottery and he got the stranger returning a winning ticket. I didn't know if the stranger knew it was a winning ticket.
You can't get luckier than that. He's done with his run of luck after that.
Yeah.
And he just got divorced, so he doesn't have to split it with his ex. Now, here's an interesting divorce question. If he got the ticket before the divorce, in our state, that would be marital property, and he'd have to split it with her. It's not when you win, it's when you get the ticket. Because it's kind of like buying a stock.
Right.
So this is interesting. It says, this is pretty funny. The ex-wife added a layer of irony and emotion to the headlines. The ex-wife was the primary breadwinner. Get this. He reportedly didn't have a stable job during their 15-year marriage. She dumped him for being a bum, and then he crushes it.
He's got more money than
for it.
Most people.
Beautiful. It's amazing. It's beautiful. So here we go. He had a 5-year alimony deal in the divorce. She was supposed to pay him for 5 years. Unfortunately for her, even as he got cashed in on the jackpot, she found herself legally obligated to continue paying him from a much weaker financial position. She said to him, the alimony, it's pocket change at this point. And she said, think about the money he just won. What I'm paying him is a pittance. And she said, she's not after his newfound fortune. She said, I'm not going after anything. I have morals.
Okay.
Talk about a real crazy story where, you would think, okay, he's going to pay alimony. It doesn't matter to him now. No, he still gets the alimony, even though he was a bum for 15 years and cashed in.
That's very interesting. I'm sure I'm curious under what legal theory he still gets alimony, but maybe it's non-modifiable. Who knows?
Maybe it was non-modifiable. Yeah. Permanent, whatever. 5 years non-modifiable kind of deal. So anyway, that's the luckiest man in America back in at least back.
Well, that makes it 3 lucks. He gets alimony, which is still lucky. He gets the lottery ticket returned to him, which is still lucky, and then he actually wins the lottery.
Huge.
He better not watch those Final Destination movies because he's got to watch out driving behind any semi or anything in case
he's maxed it out. There's no more. You're only going to go down from here. Exactly. Okay, so tell us about the oligarch story. This is interesting.
Yes. We did a Russian oligarch story last time about a divorce that was in Connecticut. Now there is another Russian oligarch named Potanin. Probably not how you say it with the Russian accent, but Vladimir, of course, that's his first name. Potanin. His ex-wife can pursue a multi-billion share of his stake in Nornickel. London Court of Appeal ruled on Thursday. So this is Thursday. Today's September 4th. So whatever. Maybe today. Today is Thursday. So I guess it was from today. So what the background really is that they actually got divorced several years ago. I believe they got divorced in 2014.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. And what happened was that at the time in Russia, they split their finances in a certain way, which his wife then came back and said, this is like 1% of the marital estate. If you look at it, she got in the underlying divorce, she only received $41.5 million, which is less than 1% of the couple's total assets after their divorce in the Russian courts. Potanin said his ex-wife received about $84 million and argued that the couple had no connection to Britain. So they're basically saying there's no reason the case should be in London because we have nothing to do with London. However, then the ex-wife and her lawyers successfully argued that she had renounced her stake, jurisdiction in Russia to sufficient effect and established enough where the UK courts could, in fact, step in because she wants to bring a claim for relief following the divorce, which she wants 50% of the value of her ex-husband's ultimate beneficial interest in Nornickel, where he owns a 37% stake in the company that's valued at nearly $9 billion. And so,
So
yeah,
my question
interesting.
is, this seems similar to the last story, if I remember right. It's these expats who leave Russia. They acquire assets internationally, like this Norilsk nickel. I'm guessing it's in like Norway or Sweden or something. I'm not sure. But then they get divorced, but then they're still chasing assets around the world. It
Right.
seems like. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like I said, this company is the world's largest palladium producer and is a major producer of refined nickel. So clearly, I mean, he's got 37% stake. And so with Russians especially, you see how they go buy property in other countries, especially in the West, and or what we define as the West, you know, the United States, Canada, UK, etc. And so then it leads to these jurisdictional issues about, can someone go back? She also wants 50% of any dividends paid to him since 2014 and a high-end Russian property on which the party spent around $150 million. And so the court ruling said, and I quote, this is a Reuters article, by the way, the court ruling said the discrepancy between her award of marital assets and the husband's retained share was significant. The discrepancy between what she had recovered in Russia compared with what she would have recovered had the case been heard in this jurisdiction was equally significant. They would have said it in a British accent, but, you know, nevertheless.
With a wig on, right?
With a wig on, right. So very interesting. We'll again, as we do, keep you posted on any updates that we find as the story progresses.
So this next one is this interesting story about age at first marriage and marital quality. So this is an article from the Institute of Family Studies. And we pulled up this article a while ago, and we always like talking about these divorce or marriage stats to give people some background. And this is pretty interesting. So we've talked before about some of these trends and the statistical trends. And it says in this article, national median age at first marriage is now 28 for women, 30 for men. Increasing age at marriage is not the only change. Divorce rates are decreasing and fewer people are marrying. And we've talked about this before. Most young adults and high school seniors desire to marry. So they say they want to marry in surveys, but fewer high school seniors think they actually will get married. While the age of marriage has risen substantially, I'm quoting the article, the connection of marital stability has not been closely examined, meaning while we're seeing the age go up, we don't know if that's improving marriages, making them more stable. And we've talked about this issue before when we talked about rates of divorce. They've been cheering, saying divorce rates are dropping. And Rahul and I have said, okay, but is that just because there are fewer people being married? Or is that because marriages are stronger somehow? And it seems like it's the first. There are just fewer marriages. So they're trying to link these things and figure this out. So it said, this is looking at a couple of studies, and some people have linked the increasing age at marriage to lower divorce rates because of a study that found early marriages have a higher divorce risk. And I think that's something we all take for granted. You know, they got married too young. So it kind of like fits our notions of what we just assume is right.
Or we want to rationalize and give a reason why this happened. Oh, they were too young. They were kids, you know, fooling around.
So the interesting thing here is the person said past research has only, this is a research study they performed. Past research has only explored the link between early marriage and divorce. A broader picture of marital quality in early marriage is absent. So they want to do an up-to-date study. The questions were, is marital quality in the early years of marriage lower for those who marry earlier versus later? Number two, are those who marry at early ages more likely to divorce within 5 years than those who marry at later ages? The sample was a good size, in my opinion. It was 1,900 women, 1,700 men. A lot of these studies that you see in the press are lousy because they survey, 100 people or 400 people or some small
in the
number.
Same geography.
Yeah, you just don't know. So one interesting thing is they have a bar chart in the article, which you can check out. It's called quality of conflict resolution. And that is how good are couples at resolving conflict? And it's by age group. And what they see is it trends up very slightly of the quality of conflict resolution between low and high, very much slightly trending upward between the age groups 18 to 20, 21 to 25, 26 to 30, 31, 35, 36. So it's slight increases from 18 to 20, a little bit more for 21, 25, tiny bit more for 26 to 30, tiny bit more for 31 to 35, but it's so slight. And then 36 plus, there's actually a slight decline. Not sure why that is, but it's a very modest difference. And then the other thing is interesting. He found in this survey, while most men and women were happy in their marriage, age at marriage did not significantly influence their marital happiness. The biggest difference is the data hint at the possibility that younger marrying men may be more worried about the future of their relationship than men who married in their late 20s and early 30s. Those who married very late reported their most concerns about marital stability. So the concerns about stability are highest in the younger ages. And as men get older, their concerns about the marriage being stable drop.
Interesting.
It's pretty interesting. It says, as motivations for marriage and societal pressure to marry have changed over the past few decades, the decision to marry has become more of a personal choice than a social norm. I certainly think that's true from my personal experience. What do you think, Rahul?
No, I completely agree. And it makes sense if you really think about the way this study is and sort of the correlation causation argument that they're making. And, what someone considers to be a young age, you had back in the day, you had the quote unquote high school sweethearts who get married right after high school. And then I think that's slowly progressed where people getting married after college now are considered young. Right. And now people getting married under 30 are considered young. So it's sort of that the definition of young is also, I think, societally evolving.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And we also see the thing of children of adult children living at home and having these sort of extended childhoods, kind of staying at home a little longer, staying at home into their late 20s, even if they have a job, staying single. I think all these things play in the economic situation where it's harder to afford stuff.
Right.
So it was societal pressure was quite high in the 20th century for people to get married at a fairly young age. And that pressure is disappearing, or it's changed, I think, radically in our culture now, where the pressure is actually, I think, reversed, at least among people I know, where they want people to wait and say, well, don't hurry into it. Wait till you're a little older and you have a job and you're established. And that's stable. Kind of a newer trend, relatively. So interesting story. Check it out if you're interested. And we just wanted to mention, sometimes we get into these statistical stories because they're just interesting. Moving on to more, now we're talking about wedding news. Give us the Logan Paul scoop. And before you launch in that, we've got our special wedding music.
Yes, you have to do it.
That's to do it. Queen and the great epic movie Flash Gordon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, another plug as always. So
that's right.
Okay, so as people may already know or not know, Logan Paul is a very famous, started off as a Disney star, I believe, way back in the day, and then kind of evolved into a social media celebrity, as a lot of the youth these days are. Then the youths, and then he then became a incredibly large business owner. The name of the business is Prime. Everyone must have seen it. Prime Energy Drinks. Him and another social media star created this Prime Energy that they successfully went on.
Paul, or is that somebody else?
It's Logan Paul, and it's I can't remember the other guy's name. He's based in the UK.
Look it up for you.
Yeah. So the two of them created Prime Energy Drinks. And then Logan Paul, who's also extremely athletic, went into the WWE and is regular in the WWE now. His brother, of course, Jake Paul, also of Disney fame. KSI, yes.
So cool, he just has three initials.
Three initials. People used to be cool when they just had one name, like Cher.
Yeah.
Or Prince, or the artist formerly known as Prince. But now it's just letters. You don't even need a name.
You just
KSI.
It's like
Exactly.
All right.
So anyway, Logan Paul brother of Jake Paul, the boxer, and also social media influencer, recently, meaning about 3 weeks ago or so, got married to his longtime girlfriend, fiance Nina Agdal, who's a model in her own right. They apparently got engaged 2 years ago in the same location, Lake Como, which became hot, I think, after the Clooney wedding.
Yeah.
And
And
Italy
Clooney has a house there, right?
Oh yeah, I think he's got a castle over there.
Nice.
And Italy's been hot recently with the Bezos wedding, also in Italy.
Right.
So definitely a very, very hot location for weddings. The couple welcomed their child, or a daughter, I guess, named Esme in September of 24, and they got married August 15th of 2025. Presume, given their respective, I guess, income streams, business interests, etc., I presume they have a very strong prenup in place. I think there was a social media. Got to do it. No, you have to do it. So I think they had a very strong prenup in place. Logan Paul also has his own podcast called Impulsive.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So yeah, very, very nice. We talk about divorces, but we also talk about weddings. So
right. $2 million estimated cost.
Yes.
For those who are keeping score at home.
Exactly. Percentage of the Bezos cost, but
for a tiny fraction, that's the gas cost to get the yacht over there.
But I think, we still know who's cooler, right? As we say.
Oh, yeah. There's no question. You can't buy cool. Everybody knows that.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what's going on. We wish them the best.
Yeah. And if you're going to have a destination wedding, and we don't think the destination weddings are a great idea, but if you're going to have it, might as well be Lake Como, because that's the new. That's where everybody's supposed to go now.
Yes.
So, all right, next one. We got divorce news for Denise Richards. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. There's an ongoing divorce battle, pretty public, with Aaron Vipers. That's my best shot at his last name. I apologize if I'm mangling it. And ongoing divorce battle. And this is really public because we've talked about, this ties into something we've discussed before, which is why you don't want to have stuff in litigation, and because it becomes public record. And the public learns about what's going on and the ugly details in your case. So Denise Richards, apparently, this is a Y Entertainment story, makes a move to involve extended family members in testimony, calling them to testify. The former reality star, that's Denise, has put plans in motion to bring her estranged husband, Aaron, and his mother into the witness dock and testify that he put his hands on her. Now, the case has been pretty dramatic, with allegations going back and forth, claims of abuse. The actress is attempting to turn her temporary restraining order into a permanent injunction. And so she submitted a witness list and included Aaron and his mother as witnesses on the witness list. Now, we're going to give you a little context on this because I think the press isn't quite getting it right. The headline is, she's calling him to testify. Rahul and I know different, and we'll get to it in a second, but it says, Richards affirmed in this witness list that Patricia Fipes, I don't know why his name's Fiper and she's Fipes, maybe he modified the name to make it sound cool, will, quote, testify regarding communications with Denise regarding abuse perpetrated on Denise by Aaron. That's a quote from the pleading. She is projecting her estranged mother-in-law to spend an hour on the witness dock. So I'm guessing their witness lists require them to disclose the estimated time for the testimony. They don't require that in Illinois. So that's kind of interesting. Richards wants to spend 6 hours testifying about the domestic violence she suffered at the hands of her ex-husband, with the alleged culprit spending 4 hours on the stand. Also very interesting, don't you think, Rahul, that they say what kind of time they think they're going to spend?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, here the court will typically ask people, how long do you expect this hearing to last, right? We might say one afternoon or one whole day. I guess there they quantify it by hours, and they want to know how much time they anticipate each witness individually spending, which is, I think, interesting.
It is, and the court is in control of the courtroom. The court is allowed authority to limit testimony and limit the time spent at trial. So having the parties show how much time do you expect to spend, the court theoretically could say, well, no, I'll give you 4 hours or whatever. I mean, that rarely happens, if ever. I don't think I've ever seen it happen in an Illinois divorce case or any of my civil litigation before that, but I know it has happened in cases before where a court thinks that testimony can be done more efficiently in less time, and they'll require a time limit.
Right. Now contrast that with depositions where you will have a 3-hour time limit and you can't exceed that unless a judge allows you to exceed it, at which point you have to let the judge know why, and the judge will grant you more time or a set amount of time additional to the 3 hours. And so that's
so this is interesting. It says, per TMZ, sources close to Pfeiffer say he's beyond ready to testify. He's not just ready, he's beyond ready. And he's going to lay all this back and forth with false accusations to rest.
Perfect. Hey.
Insider note. Okay. Richards' ex has nothing to hide. All right. Well, we're going to rock and roll then. And then Richards made one last request to the judge, asking the court to throw Pfeiffer's and his family out of the house in Calabasas. We call that a petition for exclusive possession of the marital residence. In our state, if you have an order of protection against you, which they're calling a restraining order, you're automatically thrown out of the house, assuming you're sharing the home with the other person, the alleged victim. Now, maybe it's a different home that they own and she wants them out of there. I don't know. But so we've got pretty nasty stuff going on here, and battles are very public. Now, what I want to get to is a witness list doesn't necessarily mean you're actually going to call those witnesses. In our state, you have to let the other lawyer know who you might call. You identify all them and you talk about the subject of their testimony, but you're not required to call them as a witness. You might, I'd say, call an audible, to use a football analogy, and decide, well, I don't need this person's testimony. And so I'm not going to call Aaron's mother because I don't think it's necessary or helpful. So sometimes it's just done as a posturing thing to basically say, well, you should be scared. I'm putting your mom on the stand.
Right. Exactly.
So we'll see what actually happens. But what's happening here, Rahul, can you briefly explain how a temporary restraining order or an order of protection operates, and then the plenary in Illinois as a parallel? Here, they're calling it a restraining order and a preliminary injunction in California. In our state, we have a special version of the temporary restraining order and plenary or injunction that we call an order of protection.
Right. And you can also have an order of protection that's just related to what is defined as domestic violence under Illinois law. You can also have a temporary restraining order or a TRO and a permanent injunction or a preliminary injunction for things that are either to compel or to stop certain action from happening. Like, tell him that he's not allowed to send me text messages. It might not rise to the level of domestic abuse, but it might still be annoying enough where it's unnecessary, and they go in and say there's no reason for X, Y, and Z to be texting me 100 times a day. I want you to enjoin him from stopping, or enjoin someone from spending money on on personal expenses that are unrelated to the marriage. For example, this gal is withdrawing thousands of dollars every month or every week from this account. Stop them, enjoin them, which means stop them from doing something. So there's that. So now the distinction is in an order of protection in Illinois, you can go in without notice to the other party or with very minimal notice to the other party to seek quote unquote emergency relief in the form of a temporary restraining order, or what we call here an emergency order of protection when it's related to domestic violence, to say, this is all happening. I don't have enough time. It's too serious. I don't have enough time to give him proper notice, or him or her proper notice to plead their case entirely. So I request this order on a temporary basis for a set period of time, depending on if it's a TRO in Illinois, it's 10 days. If it's a temporary or an emergency order of protection, it's 21 days for them to get sufficient notice. So you're protected, and then they get notice, they get served, and they get to file a response, things like that within that time period. And then you'll come back to court and the judge will decide, hey, am I going to have a full hearing on this with all the witnesses to testify, to then try and determine as finality if I'm going to grant a permanent order or at least a plenary order for the relief that you're seeking. So that's the distinction.
Is your handle Chicago Divorce on Instagram?
At Chicago Divorce.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, cool. So thank you. No, that's perfect. Thank you. Next, we want to talk. So that's the story with them. We'll keep up with this one because it's certainly interesting, and we'll give you the juicy details as they come out. But it'll be interesting to get the follow-up when they actually have this hearing and see what ended up happening and who was called to testify, because the press is saying like, oh, they're going to call the mom and Aaron for all these hours, blah, blah, blah. And really all it is a notice saying we might do that. That's really what it is. And you're required to identify anybody you might call. So lawyers tend to throw everything in the kitchen and the kitchen sink in there to make sure they cover all the bases to not shortcut themselves. So, okay. Now we're going to talk about our core divorce topic today, and that's custody and schooling for minor children. So briefly, I want to just talk about the distinction between custody and visitation. And this is sort of an all 50 states thing. We'll talk a little bit about Illinois. So because it deals with school here. So we used to have custody as a general concept, and it was called custody and visitation. And now it's allocation of parental responsibilities for custody and allocation of parenting time for visitation.
Only in Illinois.
Only in Illinois. Yeah. So we'll use custody and visitation as general concepts. There is basically joint or sole custody. Joint custody is shared decision-making about the child in terms of education, healthcare, religion, and their extracurricular activities. So every aspect of their life is lumped into the idea of custody, and it's the right to make decisions about the child. So joint custody, you're supposed to share in those decisions. Sole custody, one parent is solely allowed to make those decisions, and the other parent has no input. So that gives you a little framework. And visitation is just the time you spend with the child, and those two things are separate. Custody is not visitation. You can have sole custody, and the other parent still has lots of visitation. So there's a lot of misunderstanding, and people say terms like full custody, which is not a thing. It's either sole or joint. And it doesn't mean like you own the children and the other person will never see them. It's one thing I've told clients in consultations is even abusers see their children under controlled conditions. I do that to get people's attention. I'm not making a political statement or whatever. What I'm saying is, assuming that person that's been accused of abuse behaves themselves, they will reintroduce them to the child under controlled conditions and supervise them carefully for a period of time until they can trust that parent, and they will increase parenting time or visitation over time usually. So my point is, visitation and custody are separate issues, and people a lot of times tie them together.
And you'll often hear people saying, I want sole custody. And you say, well, what does that mean to you? I don't know. I want sole custody. People often get hung up on that label of custody, which is really one of the reasons why the Illinois legislature decided to get rid of that entirely and say no more custody, nobody gets custody.
There was a lot of fighting over it because they
Yes.
felt like it's possession. Custody sounds like ownership. Like if I've got custody, I own the kids.
Right.
And so they took, in Illinois, the folks that changed the legislation, like you said, felt like we're causing more conflict than it's worth by just these terms that we're using.
Right.
And when you say parental responsibility, it's more like, oh, I have responsibilities I have to bear. It's not just
I want sole responsibility, right?
Yeah. It's not like property, like I get the kids and I win them. So one idea too is to emphasize the importance of the role of both parents for raising the children. So we just wanted to mention that in Illinois now they've split out these elements into decision making. So theoretically, a court can allocate school to one parent and not to the other, or make healthcare joint but school for one parent. That's rare,
right?
But it's usually joint or sole in one direction or the other. But it can happen. So let's get a couple of topics that we get often, Rahul. One thing be great for you to address is, let's talk about the intrusive step-parent problem, which happens more often than you'd think. So let me lay out the scenario, and then let's talk about, it'd be interesting to hear you talk about kind of how we'd approach it. We have a new stepmom, let's say, who starts dropping the kids off and picking them up from school instead of dad, and shows up at the parent-teacher conference. This obviously upsets the real mom. What can somebody do in that situation if stepmom starts plugging herself into the kids' lives? Let's talk about beyond transportation, but like the school, the parent-teacher conferences, things of that nature, or an IEP meeting for a kid who's got disabilities.
Sure, absolutely. So I think this is a very, very, actually, probably very fairly common issue that I'm sure a lot of people face, and one that we frequently hear from clients or potential clients and that we frequently dealt with. So it's not an on or off, it's not a binary sort of an issue. It's very, very much gradient or on the spectrum of how serious to not serious at all. If stepmom wants to drop the kids off at school, I mean, so be it. It's not some, current girlfriend. If it's a stepmom because they're actually legally married, dad and new spouse, new wife are married and have, kids, stepchildren. I don't think there is too much issue with a step parent occasionally doing some of the drop off just so the schedule works.
Sure.
I don't think that's that big of an issue. I think the issue, like you said, becomes more problematic when they start attending a lot of these very, very personal meetings with teachers. Now, you have a parent teacher meeting. Let's say you have an IEP, which is even more serious. But if you have a parent teacher meeting and the teacher wants to meet with the parents to try to talk about the child, the dad and mom should attend, and stepmom shouldn't attend unless the teacher thinks it's important for all caregivers to be present so they can sort of discuss. And stepmom should not take the place of real mom, bio mom. And that's the key. So if mom and dad if dad and stepmom want to come in as a unit and mom goes in as a separate unit, I don't think there's too much issue with that unless and until the stepmom starts controlling the situation, doesn't let mom speak, thinks she is the mom in the situation. It's like the kids say, right? You got to stay in your lane. So
it's mom and dad have the decision-making authority.
Correct. Exactly.
Not step-parents.
Not stepmom, not step-parents. Dad cannot give stepmom his decision-making ability. Delegate it. He cannot, she's not his proxy.
And we've seen that. We've seen cases where the step-parent brings the child to the doctor and is making medical decisions, or they're attempting to make medical decisions. Those are no-nos.
Those are huge no-nos, unless both bio parents are like, hey, I trust you. You're a great person. We can't be there. I'm glad you're taking the kids. No problem, right?
If everybody emergency, if there's an emergency, you have to use common sense.
Right. But otherwise, big no-no. IEP, same thing. Even more of an issue because it has to do with the child's mental sort of framework as, with education-related issues that they're having. So definitely stay in your lane.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think it's just what can be done if you run into this circumstance is you ask nicely. So send an email or communicate with your ex and say, you're not agreeing to this in the future. You don't condone it. You don't want to see them at the IEPs or any of the school conferences, and you're asking them specifically to not attend. Failing that, you have to bring a petition to enforce the judgment. And a court will exclude that person from that stuff. They're not supposed to be involved. So you'll get a remedy from the court if it persists, if the problem continues. But transportation, and we get this question too, like, I don't like that he's bringing that so-and-so is driving, like, he cheated on me with this lady and I don't like her and I don't want her picking up the kids or taking them to school. Sorry, that's just not something the court's going to care about. You're not going to go anywhere with that argument.
You can't nitpick. It's got to be big decision making, otherwise you'll be sort of exactly, or you'll be the what they call like the eggshell plaintiff, right? Where every little thing will essentially break your shell, which is
and if everything is, then also like the judge starts thinking you're crying wolf and stuff on these small things. You want to save your ammunition for the big ticket items when something really comes up that bothers you. So we wanted to talk about that because it came up recently in a case in the firm, and we thought it was a useful topic to talk about because people ask these questions of us frequently.
Yeah, and it's also back to school, so I mean we're in that
school time. This is our back to school
episode
topic.
Yes.
So let's move on and talk about some legal developments, and we'll just kind of highlight a couple of these. This is first a California update. There's a Family Law Amendment Act from 2024. It includes a lot of changes. Property settlements, which interestingly enough recognize economic abuse as family violence, and a codified case law. What that means in English is California had certain case law as opposed to state laws. They had judge-made law based on various cases regarding division of property. And they decided to amend their actual statutes, the state laws, to reflect what was in their case law. So they're making it what we call black letter law, which means typed out in paragraphs in an actual statute book. So that's going to, the guideline or the goal is to create fairer property divisions. And this will apply to new and existing cases, except currently ongoing hearings. And the interesting thing is courts have to consider the economic impact of family violence. That's new. And it removes the 2-year marriage reconciliation certificate for divorce. And I'm guessing that's similar to what we have in Illinois, where we used to have a 2-year waiting period that you could waive. And so they're basically trying to emphasize out of court resolutions and also consider this economic violence as a form of domestic violence, which is, I know there's been a push in several states to do that, to recognize coercive control and financial abuse as a legitimate form of legal abuse. So the next thing, you want to talk about this Project 2025?
Yeah. Time reported on September 1st that Project 2025, for people who don't know, that's spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation, or is aiming to eliminate no-fault divorce nationwide. So as people know, and as we kind of talk about with celebrity news, they say so-and-so are separating. They've cited irreconcilable difference as the reason for their separation. Well, that just basically means they live in a no-fault jurisdiction, or they're filing for divorce in a no-fault jurisdiction where there's really no one is, and the court doesn't allow for someone to use a quote-unquote reason, or as they say, ground for divorce, except for something called irreconcilable differences. They just don't want to be married to each other anymore, regardless of what may have happened. However, the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 aim to get rid of that, basically reverting to a fault-based system or bringing back grounds for divorce like abandonment or desertion, adultery, cruelty, etc., etc. So,
and this has to be done state by state.
Exactly.
So this is something that if it happens at all, you're going to see it happening in state legislatures and not, of course, not across all 50 states.
Right. Because the divorce is not federal in the United States. For our international listeners, divorce is, some countries have divorce as a federal issue where it's a country's law. Here in the United States, divorce is it's state law. So every state has its own divorce laws, rules, procedures, etc. So that's why you always hear us also say, your mileage may vary in your state because, we can only speak for Illinois law.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We don't, just because Project 2025 advisors want to do it, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it really hasn't yet. So if changes to state law are being pushed, we'll be talking about it. We've talked about it in earlier pods. There have been a couple of moves here and there, or early attempts. There was a talk in Indiana about making divorce a little tougher, and that bill got pulled. So it never went anywhere. So we'll see. I'm skeptical. I don't think this is really going to get off the ground anywhere, but we shall see.
We shall see. And I don't know what any benefit to it would be. And I can't imagine most states, like you said, pushing this forward. So don't concern or worry too much about this.
Yeah. And there was so much work done over decades to get no fault divorce. And the main complaint being divorce was too expensive.
Took too long.
Too much fighting, and was bad for children. And for all those are that the length of the divorce and all that, the acrimony was bad for children. So I understand the idea is if we make divorce harder, more people will stay married. That's at least I'm guessing that's the goal or the concept, the theory. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm skeptical, but the bottom line is, though, no one knows. I don't know if there's correlation there at all or any proof of a causal link. It's an interesting theory, but there was so much work done to get to no fault divorce for a lot of good reasons that I think it's going to be very hard to undo it. So we've heard about covenant marriages in some states. Those exist. It makes it harder to get divorced, but those people go into their marriages signing off on that.
They've chosen that.
Yeah, they choose it. They agree to it up front. This concept is making it apply to everybody's marriage is the idea. Okay, moving on to Australia. Normally not a topic of discussion here, but this is something that seems to be reflecting a trend, and that is in Australia, courts must explicitly consider family violence in property division. Very interesting, including economic abuse. This ties in with the California thing. It codifies what they call just and equitable adjustments to the division of the estate based on these things. And it applies retroactively, meaning to cases filed before the bill was passed. Encourages non-court resolution to reduce backlogs. These are notes on what's happening with this. Well, this trend to consider family violence is very interesting. In Illinois, violence doesn't impact property division or alimony.
Right.
It has no bearing at all. And there are people that say, well, that's not right. And if there's an abuse by, coercive control with finances, that should come into play in an Illinois divorce division of assets or maybe in alimony. And that's not the case in our state. Now, it might be in other states. We're just not aware of it. But in Australia now, strictly going to be included and taken into consideration. So this just was sort of an interesting tie-in to the California law change where they're recognizing economic abuse as family violence. So I'm guessing this is a trend we're going to see elsewhere over time. And folks will talk about financial starvation as a form of coercive control and abuse. And there's research backing that up. So we'll see how this progresses and what remedies courts use to try to redress that or, to make up for harm done by this type of, you might say, economic violence or withholding of money kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's, Rahul, why don't you talk about the Bumble 30%, and then I want to talk about this AI app.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's put Mark the spot right here.
Okay. Or I can do it. I don't mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say only because I
have
to pull up the thing here.
Yeah, I got
it. If you want to do that, yeah, that'd be great.
So this is really interesting because it ties into threads we've been talking about in previous shows. And we've talked about struggles with dating apps and my 20-something sons complain about the dating apps all the time. There's been this explosion of different apps, of course, and some changes to them over time. And we talked about what appears to be a trend, at least on social media, towards IRL or in real life dating, which Rahul and I kind of think is obvious that you're going to have your best chances meeting people in real life. But it seems that the dating app blowback is real, and Bumble has announced recently that it's laying off a third of its workforce, which is impacting 240 positions. And they say that the cuts are part of its plans to, quote, realign its operating structure to optimize execution on its strategic priorities. Okay. Otherwise known as cutting costs. They anticipate saving $40 million per year. That's a ton. And they want to reinvest the money into product and tech development. Their stock went up 20% when they announced the news. And they're actually increasing their revenue forecast in addition to their workforce reduction. So their CEO came back in March after stepping down in 2023. They've had some struggles. So what's really interesting is they had weak first quarter earnings, and that former CEO said Bumble needs me back. This is kind of like the Starbucks CEO, Howard Schultz, coming back to the company to save it.
Yes.
But they Match, which owns Tinder and Hinge, has also been struggling to retain users. Match announced in May it was laying off 13% of its staff. This is very interesting. These apps are struggling, I think, as people find they are not satisfying. They're not happy with the results. So they're dropping off, they're quitting their subscriptions. So we're reading about these threads and other stories. We've told you about these in the show before. And the bookend to this is Bumble said that they are preparing to test a new dating method built on, guess what? AI.
Of course.
Shocker. The platform is set to launch in beta this fall, will focus less on profile photos and more on psychology, which of course everybody's complaint is everybody's just looking at pictures. They're not, telling me who these people are. The company says the new app will study user behavior, past relationships, and attachment styles to create matches that aim to be more lasting. Now, I have to tell you, when I was in high school in 1987, you could pay like $10 to be part of a matchmaking thing in the high school where you took this test. It was like a Scantron, and you filled in like 100 questions or 50 or something. And they ran everybody through a computer. Back then, it was probably a mainframe with blinking lights on the front, stuff like that, and tape spinning around like in old spy movies.
Like the old Batman movies.
Yeah, and you got this dot matrix printout of your matches, and it was the talk of the school. It was because you were most compatible, and that was AI dating back then. So they say, I'm sure this is all of a piece. They're struggling to retain users. They're trying to find ways to make their customers happy. It says the idea comes at a crucial time when many people are losing interest in swipe-based apps. Research shows almost 80% of Gen Z users are dropping regular use. That's a huge 80% of Gen Z are bailing out. 78% of matches stop after 3 messages. So people are just frustrated, and they say studies also suggest visual choices account for most swipe decisions, but don't predict long-term success. And Rahul and I have talked about that. Rahul talked about the height issue last show. We talked about the photo issue where women swipe on 10% of men on the apps, and people are mad. They don't like it.
Right.
And if they drop off the apps, then the people that are looking for them on the apps aren't going to find them. And users is the fodder. Those things run on the users. So
right.
No users, no app.
No app, so, no matches.
So they are desperate, and they're trying to do this. And it's like, okay, now they're going to do this AI matchmaking thing. Well, good luck. I read on Twitter or on X, somebody said, okay, so they give you this personality match, right? They're still going to show you the photos at some point. Like, okay, I want to see them now. It's like that show where you hear them and they don't show you The Bachelor or whatever. What's that dating show? I don't know the name of it.
No, it's called Love is Blind.
Love is Blind. Yeah, yes. Right. It's like that. So Love is Blind until you want to see the pictures, and then you still say, I don't want to date them or whatever. So good luck to these guys. But I think we're also seeing a resurgence in the popularity of human matchmakers because people want real connections.
They want real connections. They want IRL, like we say. And they go to those bars where they have the PowerPoint presentations with like the speed dating and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, it's just a lot more there. After the last several years of just purely virtual life, people crave actual human interaction, I guess. So we're coming full circle.
I just saw a story last night on YouTube about the death of social media. Basically, people are exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
And when the follow button was invented, which was an invention, we forget, you could pick the people you wanted to follow. And if you liked them, you would regularly see their content. Well, then the big innovation changed and Facebook flipped it over where Facebook fed you stuff they wanted you to see. And it became an ad platform and the whole game changed. And then TikTok went a step further where people are just being fed this stuff that's clickbait, basically. It's not even what they necessarily want to see. And they're getting really frustrated by seeing like less and less quality stuff and more just rage bait, clickbait, and other rabbit hole kind of garbage. And it ties into this whole dating app exhaustion. People want real interactions and are getting tired of battling, texting 10 different people on their little tiny screen. And then the matches all break up and they don't actually meet anybody. And they're wasting their time and they're getting to feel used by these apps, and people don't like it. So interesting. So tying into this, Rahul, let's assume you do match with somebody on Bumble and you're going to date them. How do you tell if you're dating a psychopath?
Yes. Great article from the folks at Vice that just came out a couple days ago. It says, here's the hook, right? How to tell if you're dating a psychopath. And apparently, first line of the article, or I guess the crux of the article is, the more success men have with dating apps, the more likely they are to be psychopaths. And it says, don't blame me, blame science. So apparently, there's a recent study called Dating App Users, Interpersonal Styles and Self-Reported Mating Success, found a correlation between dating app success and psychopathy. Namely, quote unquote, psychopathic men tend to report more hookups on Tinder. And so it's sort of like this question of just because you're successful, because let's say you're, tall, dark, and handsome, as they say in those romance novels. Let's just say, you're one of those. Does that mean you're a psychopath? No, of course not. But at the same time, individuals who have elevated levels of traits associated with a fast life history use visual social media platforms more intensely. And that, I guess,
that fast life.
Yeah.
That's like what my mom used to warn me about fast girls when I was in high school. Like, does that mean she's got a car? What are we talking about? I was clueless.
Right, exactly. And they say, some of the personality traits associated with psychopathy. So it sounds like there's a correlation between psychopathic personalities and success, because it says qualities like callousness and a lack of empathy might play a role when being dishonest about their intentions or how they might impact others. Not to mention, these individuals tend to be more manipulative and charming, which is how they, here's the words they use, lure their victims to begin with. So that's what the article says. And so again, not our words, it's coming from the article. So on the other hand, research also found that women who reported more success and hookups on the dating apps tended to lower their standards. Again, going with the whole prior study that we discussed a couple episodes ago, where we said that, men try to outkick their coverage and women try to stay within their means, I guess, let's say.
Love that term.
So here we go. How to spot a psychopath on dating apps. And they say it's not easy. They possess the ability to mimic normal reactions or emotions like empathy and care. But if you notice the person is agreeing with everything you say, changing their opinions constantly to match yours, in that case, you might be thinking this person has psychopathology. They might attempt to rush
with a psycho.
Yeah, exactly. As we say, psycho. They might attempt to rush your connection, especially physically, by appeasing you or love bombing you, as they say, with affection and adoration.
Okay.
So
that's why you do that coffee date in the neutral location. Have your backup plan set up, folks, to have your escape plan figured out.
Exactly. And like Banavac said in our episode that we like to, in our episode with him earlier on, what is the purpose of that first date? Is just to see if there's going to be a second date. Right. So that's all. Get in, get out.
Episode 11 for those of you playing the home game and want to check it out. Mike Banavac, a millionaire date doctor. Really awesome episode. So yeah, that's the show for today. Thank you. So let's talk about how you can find us. So Rahul, tell us how people can find you on social. I think I've got your handle up on our screen here if I did this right, but tell everybody.
You can find me at Chicago Divorce on Instagram, or you can also find me, you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook and LinkedIn. Rayford Palmer, at Rayford Palmer on Instagram, X, and TikTok. And our firm is STG Divorce Law in Chicago. We handle divorce for smart, successful people all across Chicagoland, now including Lake County, opening a Lake Forest office. Excited to announce that. And we're in all the collar counties around Cook. And I'm the author of the best-selling divorce book, I Just Want This Done. It's back here up on the shelf. How smart, successful people get divorced without losing their kids, money, and minds. Available on Amazon, Kindle, and where all great ebooks are sold. And my new book coming out soon, I Just Want to Know How Smart, Successful People Decide on Divorce Without Fear, Uncertainty, and Doubt. That's going to help people decide what to do. The folks that aren't sure, this book is a tool for you. I wish I had it in 2014 when I was struggling in my marriage. And it's the tool I wish I had. And I'm creating that for you in the audience. So thank you very much for listening. You can find our law firm at stglawfirm.com. If you need divorce help in Chicagoland, please look us up. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, follow. Give us reviews for the show. We always love your feedback and need to know if we're doing the right stuff on this show. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day.